Thank you very much for being with us. How is everything in El Salvador? A lot of work over here. And some people say, thank God that there is work, and others say, we wish there would be some time to rest. So, thank you for being here. The intention today is to update ourselves on the parametric insurance. And we're still waiting for Scarlett to join us. I'd like to comment that our executive director will not be able to be here because of a family emergency. She's in the hospital with her husband. She will not be able to connect from where she is, but she wishes a lot of success to us in this meeting. So, before we start there and look at the agenda, I would like to have a presentation round. Let's start with you, Licenciado Flores, Wilfredo Flores, Executive Secretary of COSEFIN. At your disposal. Continue with Álvaro. Let's continue with Álvaro. He's muted. Scarlett. Good afternoon to all. Scarlett Pineda from the Biodiversity Directorate, and with me is David Ortega from Biodiversity too. We're both environmental analysts, and we have been supporting the reef rescue initiative in Honduras, and to the Secretary of the SERNA, which is the Ministry of Environment. Jackie? Jacqueline, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, it's wonderful to meet you all. I'm working with MarFund on estimating the response costs and helping with all sorts of things on the MAR insurance program, as well as helping to lead the work on the sustainability strategy, which we hope to discuss today.
Gracias. Y de parte del equipo de MarFund está
on behalf of MarFund, we have Sara. Would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, my name is Sara Guifaro. I'm the technical assistant of the Reef Rescue Initiative of MarFund. Claudia. Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Ocaña. I'm administrative assistant of MarFund's Reef Rescue Initiative. Welcome, Nasa. And from Oxford Center, we have Gloria. Yes.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Claudia Ruiz. Yo trabajo para MarFund desde hace algún tiempo.
My name is Claudia Ruiz. I work with MarFund, and I'm in charge of Reef Rescue and the Parametric insurance program. So we're going to have a read the agenda. And we want to see if there are going to be any introduction words. Thank you, Claudia. Thank all those present on behalf of Licenciada Sandy Pereira, Director of Biodiversity. We thank you for taking the time to talk with us today about the analysis of budget for attention to the climate risks in the coastal marine ecosystems. We're hoping that today we can reach some important agreements, that we can reach the same page regarding the strategy that we want to carry out in order to protect our ecosystems or provide them another option for protection and restoration. We hope that we can solve or talk about any concerns that's come up today. And we also would love to thank the Marfund work team that's always informing us, keeping us in context of these important projects. Thank you, Scarlett. And so a logistic, so if we're going to have interpretation English and Spanish, yes, we are.
Ok, muchas gracias. Ok, bueno, entonces básicamente muchas gracias, Scarlett. Como dijo Scarlett, nosotros
Thank
queremos
you
el
very
día
much, Scarlett. As she mentioned, today we want to reach an agreement on the budgets and the financing of the program of the parametric insurance. And this program we have been studying this. It has evolved very positively, and we would like to present to you today Licenciado Josefin and Flores so that they can talk to us about where we are at this moment in this program, to have some analysis of the costs and also regarding the sustainability of the program. So we can reach some recommendations that you may like to provide. We also would like to talk about our availability of budget and what financing sources we could find to continue supporting the program. And if we have time to talk about a meeting that we have planned or we hope for at the beginning of next year to start to continue training the region in financial mechanisms in natural systems. First point of the agenda, we had the presentation participants and the first talk that is related to the program of the parametric insurance and the sustainability. So we're going to listen to Scarlett with a brief presentation of the progress with approaching the authorities in Honduras. And if you're in agreement, Licenciado Flores, maybe you could mention briefly what are the available budgets in the region for these climate risks. And the last point would be to talk a little bit about the strategic regional meeting for an exchange of experiences and financial mechanisms for attention to climate risks. Before the talk, I would like to know if you have any questions, comments regarding the agenda or any other topic you would like to talk about. I'm happy with the agenda. Thank you very much. So if you agree, we can start with the first presentation, which is the progress of the insurance. I will share my screen. This presentation is divided in two. One is the technical part of advances, and the other is the budget analysis and proposals and strategies. Jacqueline will be talking about this. She's with Sam, with the parametric insurance, and she's an expert in risk analysis. So we will see what this is about. As you've seen before, this is a program designed by Marfa together with other partners in the region, with Watson, which is for this insurance is applied in the 4 countries of the region, Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. We're going to have a look first to see why we're doing this. This mechanism is like a sustainability strategy that is designed for immediate funds, access to immediate funds when there is an emergency because of impact on hurricanes. And as I mentioned, in 2021, there was an analysis economic study in the area, it was determined that there was a contribution of economic benefits of more than $4,500 million. And this was in tourism, coastal protection, and fishery. So we see it's very significant, and it is important what is being provided in this area, especially in the coastal regions, creating significant income for the communities. However, you know that the Mar also has climatic threats as well as human. One of them is the hurricanes. Among the most important events is the increase of the intensity and of hurricanes, and this can cause damage and reduction of live coral and a threat to the fishery and biodiversity. However, this has a solution. These reefs can be restored, but would take several years. And there is an emergency response, which is the post-storm response, which is hoping to reduce the negative impacts of the hurricanes. And this requires a budget financing. But before going into this, I would like you to see these examples of some of the harm that is caused in some of these reefs. These are real events in several sites of the region. Here you can see the Hurricane Vilma from Mexico 2005. Starting at that point, in Mexico, they decided to propose immediate attention measures. And from here, you see the post-storm response capacity. We will talk about it later. This is a pilot program that was created in the Mar with the main objective of applying a rentable insurance to cover the coral reefs in the Mar and the beneficiaries that depend on these ecosystems and their environmental services. We work with Willis Towers Watson, which is an entity with a lot of experience in parametric insurances. And as I mentioned before, the funds from this insurance, the payment is to attend the post-storm activities in the reefs for recovering the reefs and the ecosystem services. And some background on this, the program started in 2018. However, it started in 2010. Marfund had started in 2010 to talk with different entities, specifically with the person who works now with Willis Towers Watson, who is Simon Jones, who's a specialist in these insurance. And in 2018, the financing was concluded. And this parametric insurance was created. So we identified that, although this was a number that we came up with, that we could probably cover 7 sites. And so the selection of 7 sites began based on the characteristics for their protection. And in 2021, more financing was concluded where there was a model that was also started. So this is one of the largest financing that we have. This was one of the largest financing. And we have also modeled the training of the brigades, and also we have received financing for training the brigades and for the policy, buying the policy, etc. Where are we going? Well, the question is if this is, we're hoping that this is going to work, that it provides benefits, and we feel it can be expanded, it can be replicated to other areas of Mar and other regions, including other risks, and working in financial sustainability of the program. In summary, how does this work? As you know, MARFAN buys the policy from 2021 till now. We have bought 3 policies so far in 3 years. What this insurance covers is basically the risk of hurricanes. When there is a hurricane in a certain site, there is a parameter, and then a payment can be generated. And this we will see it when Jackie explains how the payment structure is working. When there is a payment, and the insurance company pays this payment, reaches another mechanism which is very important, which is the emergency fund. This is a mechanism of financing that is to cover damages in place in sites, both by hurricanes or other, such as, for example, grounding or stranding of vessels. And it's a small amount, but there's enough to cover this kind of emergency. And so this is a key mechanism because it does not only provide emergencies in the reef, but also it can distribute from there the payment funds, making it more efficient. When the insurance pays this fund, it is directed to the response groups that are installed in the areas within their coordinating committees. What have we done up to date? As I mentioned, we started in 2021. That year, we covered 4 pilot sites that you can see, 2 in Mexico, 2 in Belize. In 2022, the second year, we also had the ISF financing, and we were able to cover 3 more sites, Utila, Roatán, and Guanaja. And this year, we were able to include 4 new sites, reaching 11 sites. And these are the prices of the policies. As you can see, these are for all of the sites, 109,000 for the 4, 154 for the 7, and 207,000 for the 11 sites. Very good. So how does the model work? This is how you can see the model. The sites are added to a concentric circle, which are, you can see that the green area is the area, the smaller area where all the reef that is added, and around it, we see 3 concentric circles with between 25, 50, and 75 kilometers from the central circle. Each one of these zones can generate a payment, a percentage, which will vary depending on the characteristics of each site, the response capacity that they have. The parameter is also related.
Un ejemplo real.
We'll see a real example soon. And we also have to mention that the payment structure has evolved since the first coverage till this one, which is the third, because we have been adjusting and learning and adjusting to the model so that it is becoming more efficient depending on where we need the response. As you can see, the number of sites has increased, and this map reflects that all the mar is covered by the insurance. So we can see from the south of Quintana Roo to the Bay Islands. This is a true example. Last year, in November 2022, Hurricane Lisa impacted Belize, the Turnef. This is a site that has been covered since the beginning, has been impacted. It generated a payment of $175,000. As you can see, all the circles are present. Turnef is in zone D, the center, and then the concentrical circles are a little further. And then the hurricane enters from zone A. It has 70 knots, which is within the parameter, which is 64. And in this payment structure that was designed for the previous one, when the event entered this zone, it didn't generate any payment. or in the A zone, in the B, but in the zone C, it could generate 5% and D 10%. Since it entered in D with a larger, it generated a 10% payment. So this meant $175 for turn F for the primary and secondary response. Okay.
cronología, así
I
sucedieron
would
los
like you to see this chronology and of how the events happened. The most important thing here is for you to see the type of effort that took place from the 31st of October, when we heard that it was possible that there might be a potential event that might hit one of the sites covered by the insurance. Willis Watson, we got in touch with them to organize the process to claim the payment. At the same time, we were in contact with TASA and with the response post-storm with Belize, and also so that they would prepare the response, prepare in such a way that when the payment was received, it could be transported to the site. So when it was confirmed that there was a payment for 175,000, we claimed the insurance, they paid, and the funds went into the emergency site, and in 2 days they reached the site. In 2 days. It took longer than what was established because there were a couple of holidays in between, and this also affected it because of there was a lack of communication. There was a series of problems, but we managed to get the money, the funds, in 15 days approximately. So you will say, well, what is the response capacity? These are work groups, task forces that are able to go and do everything possible for the repair. And in this program, with the support of the countries, of the donors, of the Nature Conservancy and the partners, we have been able to install and train more than 140 brigaders and guardians of the reefs, brigaders, and we have 6 committees installed. There are 14 brigades, 14 brigades. So they are forming a new one for the new ones, and the tools have been donated so that these can operate. We must mention that Honduras has an important number of trained brigaders, trainers, response plans that are well designed, and 3 committees that are also coordinated. And regarding a summary to close, you can see that the benefits of the program is that this is it's more useful to buy one policy, which will minimize the cost, because if we buy separate policies, it's much more expensive. The management of the payment is efficient if it is distributed efficiently through an emergency fund, and it allows the post-storm response to be immediate. The mechanism has been proved. With the experience of Belize, we proved that the payments are fast and can reach the field directly to be able to exercise a response. And here are our donors and our partners, with which I finish this presentation. And I would like to know if you have any questions before passing to the second part.
Fui un poco rápido para darle espacio.
I spoke very quickly so that I would leave enough space for the other presentations.
Hello.
So we are going now to listen to Jacqueline. So we're going to pass to the second point of the agenda. Jacqueline, would you please share?
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you all hear me and see my presentation?
Sí. Yeah.
Great.
Muy bien.
Okay, great. So first, to start very quickly, just looking into the 2021 IDB study that Claudia mentioned and what it says specifically about the value of the mar in Honduras. That study estimated that the mar supports more than 280 million US dollars in economic value in Honduras every year, which is more than 1% of Honduras's 2022 GDP, so quite significant. So first, that kind of small number you'll see there, that 3.8 million. According to studies on the protective value of reefs, the mar avoids more than an annual average of 3.8 million US dollars in flood damages in Honduras. So it's worth noting that the actual amount of avoided damages after individual extreme events will be much higher, but that's the kind of average amount over a sufficient period of time that the mar actually protects the coast from flood damages and coastal property. So also associated with this number, the mar protects more than 400,000 people that live in areas that are lower than 10 meters above sea level in Honduras. So I suspect that number, it looks quite conservative, but behind it is a much higher number. Then moving on to the actual reef-related income, the mar is estimated to support more than 235 million US dollars in reef-related income every year, and this is in the tourism and fishing sectors. So this includes more than 116 million in net business revenues. This is from activities such as accommodation, diving, and fishing, as well as fish cleaning of reef-associated species. So then there's also 95 million every year in wages to fishing and tourism workers, as well as more than 24 million in annual tax revenue. And this is just from reef-related accommodation, which the study did assess, but it did not assess the tax revenue from reef-related fishing. So that is not included. And then that reef-related income is also estimated to generate an additional 46 million US dollars in indirect economic benefits across the other sectors of the Honduran economy. So that's, I guess, the value that is at risk to reef degradation. But how much does it cost to actually protect that value via the reef response that Claudia described? So this table shows the results of our recent assessment of the costs of reef response in Honduras. As you can see, these costs are a pretty tiny amount compared to the value of the reef. But basically at the bottom there, that total estimated budget required for 60 days of emergency response estimates just that. So it captures the cost of 60 full days of response according to the protocol that was developed by the Nature Conservancy, which is done by trained divers, snorkelers, and in order to actually reattach the reef and repair the reef. So these budgets are based on the number of the responders that are actually available at each site, which we've recently reassessed. So you'll see up there on top, for example, at Roatan, there are 14 reef guardians. And then all the way on the other side in Tela, there are currently 10 reef guardians available for response. So this drives the budget requirement and then also the price of inputs for response, which you can see there in the table. So things like the salaries of the reef guardians, boat rental, the cost of cement to reattach the corals, etc. So these are the absolute figures, but just to note that labor here is accounting for more than a third of the total cost of response in all the sites of Honduras, except for Cayos Cochinos, where transportation is really expensive and accounts for more than 40% of the total cost because extra boats are needed to move cement and scuba equipment back and forth because of its remoteness. so those are the total costs for 60 days of response. And when would that 60 days of response actually be needed? So research shows that coral vulnerability increases pretty significantly at wind speeds of 100 knots. So this is category 3 force winds. So what we're budgeting for is that those maximum budgets on the previous slide are available to support all the reef guardians to implement a full 60-day response whenever a category 3 hurricane.
60 días cuando hay un huracán de categoría 4.
Sorry, I think something's going on with the translation.
Something's going on, Claudia.
Lo desconectaron.
¿Qué pasó con la traducción?
Se desconectaron los botones de traducción.
I'm just hearing this one.
Ahora, no,
Los
Jacqueline, just wait just 1 second. There's like a problem
desactiva-
with the translation.
Should I just mute and continue, or should I wait?
No, just give us just a few.
Perfect. No worries.
Yeah, sorry for that. I think you're good to go.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you can continue. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So the full 60-day response is whenever a category 3 hurricane passes directly over the reef. You can see again what Claudia mentioned about the green area in the middle of that circle over Cayos Cochinos that shows the reef area. And then also the full response budget should be available whenever a category 4 hurricane passes within 25 kilometers of the reef area. So that's the circle there in orange, or a category 5 hurricane passes anywhere within 50 kilometers of the reef. So that's the area there in pink. But what about the costs of less intense hurricanes that do not require a full 60 days with all the available capacity? We have also estimated these budgets required as a proportion of the total full response. And that's to give responders flexibility, but also recognize that they'll need to do less response for less intense events. So here in this matrix, you can see the minimum guideline proportion of the total response budget that should be available for less intense events. So then to give you an idea of the real budgetary requirements of reef response, we also need to estimate how much it costs over time, since storms do not occur every year and they're not always the same intensity. So modeling the estimated response costs for historical hurricane events can give us a really good idea of what could be needed in the future. So this figure up on the screen shows the estimated cost of post-storm reef response for the 10-year period from 1969 through the end of 1978, had the current reef response capacities been available. As you can see, 4 hurricane events would have impacted the Mar in Honduras, and each response would have required some pretty significant fundraising effort, and that's all in the immediate aftermath of each hurricane, when repairing the damage to gray infrastructure and property is quite rightly often prioritized. So in total, over this 10-year period, it's estimated that reef response would have required more than $1.8 million US and quite significant amounts after, quite disruptive hurricanes. So this is what would need to be raised without insurance, but it also shows you why the insurance is so potentially useful, because here on this slide, you can see how insurance would smooth those variable costs of reef response, as insurance premiums are relatively stable year to year, while the variable payouts would be made in response to those variable events. So, so basically by paying the $207,000 US every year, which Claudia mentioned is this year's premium, you can see in this figure how the Mar insurance program would have performed theoretically over the past 123 years had the current coverage been in place. So you can see that there would have been 84 payouts triggered over that 123-year period, and 35 of those would have been for Honduras. And you can see the volatility in those payouts, which are aligned with the reef response costs. So instead of having to cover the reef response costs when they come, you just cover the premium every year, and then the payout is available. So how is the current coverage actually designed? The most important features are the limits, the parametric trigger, and the payout structure. So first, I'm going to talk about the limits a little bit. Here you can see the current limits of the program, which are the maximum payout amounts that can be made for each event, or also over the policy year. So each insured reef site has its own event limit, which is the maximum amount that could be paid out after any hurricane passes near the reef site. So every event could have this same limit paid out. So these limits have actually evolved over the years of the pilot, as Claudia mentioned, and the current limits are set at the maximum response cost that we estimated back in February, which were based on the total number of reef guardians actually trained in the country, which may be able to respond at each site. So we assumed that, say, Honduras has 69 reef guardians trained, then we assume, for example, that 69 would have been able to respond at either Utila, Roatan, or Guanaja. And then because there's less mobility with Cayos, Cochinos, and Tela and the Bay Islands, we assumed that a sub portion of the 69 would have been able to respond at Cayos, Cochinos, or Tela. So that's what you see there in the limits, in the site limits. And then each country, if you move over to the right-hand side, also has its own national event limit. So this acts as sort of a cap on the total amount that could be paid out for any country for any one event. So for example, you see that the Honduras limit there is 1,040,000. So what that does is, because we assumed that, reef responders trained anywhere in Honduras would be able to respond to any event, the actual site limits, if you add them up, are more than the amount of reef guardians that are actually trained in the country. So the national event limit is the cost of mobilizing every single reef responder that's ever been trained in the country at every single reef site. And then if you move to the bottom on the right-hand side, there's the entire region has an aggregate annual limit. So this is the maximum amount that could be paid out in any given policy year. So this year, before the end of hurricane season or before May 31st, when the policy year ends, a total of $2 million US dollars could be paid out. So this is a really important feature because it gives insurers certainty in the total capital at risk in any given year. So this makes the product much more marketable, and it also constrains the cost of risk transfer. But just so you know, based on the historical analysis, it's extremely unlikely that this annual program limit would ever be exhausted. So in the 123-year history, it has never been reached. And so we have basically every reason to think that this is an extremely unlikely event that we hit that 2 million limit. Then the next really kind of important part of the design is the trigger design, which Claudia already did a really good job of explaining. So basically, payouts are triggered by hurricanes that pass near the covered reef sites. Each of the reef site has a reef zone, which is that circle in green. And then there are the successively bigger zones around there. So when a hurricane passes anywhere in that covered zone, a payout is made, and each reef site has its own payout structure this year for this coverage. So each reef site has 4 levels of payout amounts, and level 4 is set at that site's event limit. And then levels 1 through 3 are some proportion of that event limit that depends on the site's size and the number of reef guardians trained. I think going forward, we may simplify this approach so that there's a shared percentage of the limit that gets released for every site, but at the moment the proportions vary depending on some site-specific characteristics. So just to give you an example of how it actually works, because I think this is the easiest way to actually understand it. So in 2001, Hurricane Iris passed through the pink zone of what's depicted there is the Roatan and Guanaja site, and it passed through as a Category 4 hurricane. So this would have triggered a level 3 payout for the Roatan and Guanaja site, which is set at $540,000 US. Then not shown here, but as you can see, there was a lot of overlap in the reef areas. IRIS would have also triggered payouts for every other site in Honduras. So it would have triggered a level 3 payout for Utila, a level 2 payout for Cayos Cochinos, and a level 2 payout for Tela. And you can see the amounts up there. So in total, this sums up to $1,237,500 US. So this would have exceeded the national event limit in Honduras, which is $1,040,000 US. So the total payout for the Honduras reef sites from IRIS would have been that national limit, which is $1,040,000. And this is the estimated cost of mobilizing all the reef guardians that have been trained in Honduras for 60 days. So it's really already more than enough to cover the costs of reef response. And then to a question that we get a lot, it is possible to calculate the proportion of that regionally aggregated premium, which is $207,000 US for the current policy, which goes towards protecting the reefs in Honduras. So Honduras's share of that $207,000 is 30%, or $62,000 US. But it's really important to know some key considerations in their interpretation of this information. So basically calculating Honduras's share of this aggregated premium for the current policy is just not the same as calculating potential future insurance premium. So insurers price insurance policies based on a range of factors, including their assessment of the average annual payout amount they expect to make over time. That's the cost of risk. Then the cost of allocating capital to cover potential payouts, and that's the cost of capital. And then they also price based on the operational and administrative expenses associated with underwriting the policy, as well as market conditions, profit expectations, and other business imperatives. So separating basically the Honduras reef sites from the other reef sites, if you wanted to have an idea of what the price of covering only Honduras would actually influence a number of those factors. And it may also have different regulatory requirements for a Honduras only policy. So really changes in the coverage conditions, as well as changes in the market over time, will influence that Honduras only price. So that's a lot of caveats, but basically, roughly, we can estimate that the cost of covering the Honduras reef sites with the limits that I previously showed you is $62,000 US. So now just moving on to our sustainability strategy that we're working on right now. So Marfund is working to establish a premium financing endowment, which will secure sustainable premium financing for the long-term continuation of the program. So we'll look to use the investment revenue to pay that aggregated premium for the regional MAR insurance program, as well as the financial costs of managing the endowment. So we're currently fundraising to capitalize that endowment. We have a proposal under development to the Insure Resilient Solutions Fund, looking to access 2 million euros. But then over the long term, our target in order to secure the kind of coverage that we have now, we would need really to raise $5 million US in an endowment. So we're looking to raise that by 2028. And we're really looking for other contributors at the moment. And then also really importantly, in the short term, we need to raise direct funding for the 2024 to 25 insurance premium, because our 3-year pilot that's funded by the Insure Resilient Solutions Fund is coming to an end. So we're seeking contributions from MAR countries and international donors. And our target is to purchase a similar level of coverage that we have this year. But if we cannot raise that full premium amount, we've identified a $110,000 premium budget to be sufficient to secure a reduced coverage that's still enough to cover the costs of reef response at all of the sites that are currently covered. So this would by basically reduced limits that instead of being set at those kind of high estimates would be set at the estimated costs of mobilizing 10 reef guardians. So that's 1 reef brigade for 50 days at each site. And then also to give you an idea of how the kind of Honduras' share changes depending on the coverage conditions. Basically, under this reduced coverage, the Honduras sites account for 38% of the estimated premium, which is approximately $42,000. And now, just to discuss the next steps, I'm going to hand back over to Claudia. But yeah, thank you, and I look forward to the questions.
Gracias, Jacqueline. Entonces, con lo que acaba de exponer Jacqueline, para hacer un resumen, los próximos pasos para
The
sostenibilidad.
next steps for accounting. That one, please. Yes, thank you. So the next steps, as we said, we need to have for a coverage $110,000 to be able to do the minimum coverage. And in the cover of just, let's say that in Honduras it would be 42,000 to be able to keep those sites. We're also working to be able to see how we can expand the proposal for a fund, common fund that could be used, and is also we'd have Marfund also contribute to these funds because they'd have to have at least $5 million to be able to generate the interest to be able to cover the costs. So therefore, with the IFSF, we can account with $2 million. So we'd have to we'd need additionally to cover that. We'd see how we can find sources from other sources, and then to as well as training people that we know that the people that were in place, we're not always have them available. So we must have a group of trainers to be able to replicate this work on a constant basis. So we're finishing these sections of presentations at this moment with, as you can see from the agenda. So we want to know from you if you have comments or questions regarding of what we've seen. Thank you, Jackie. Is there any specific question for Jackie on this subject of the analysis of financial costs? Or financing costs, better said. Or any recommendations that you might have. It's a little long, but yes, we're doing the presentation so that you would have questions later on. We can also be able to see them as well. So, Claudia, I'm sorry. She says because of the closeness that we've had with one of the most frequent questions is how often will you be updating these analyses that are being made in a function of because the payments are varied by year, so different amounts. What are to be able to design this insurance? What are the things that are repeated to be able to replicate what we're doing in these policies and these estimates that we've had to be as realistic as possible in our budget. So I also tell you, I'm transmitting what other people have asked me to say. So does anybody want to answer this? Jackie? Jackie, would you like to respond to that question?
Yeah, sure. So sorry for the delay. It's the translation. So thank you. Thanks for the question. So the estimates kind of constantly being updated. And it's actually really important even for our knowledge, even within the policy year. So not just to scramble, make them in the month or so before the renewal comes up so that we can change the policy conditions, but actually to always be aware of the response capacities so that we really know how much budget will be expected to need to be mobilized really quickly. And the budgets, for example, in year one were pretty much just estimated on the size of the sites and the amount of coral in the sites. And that at the time seemed like a really good idea because we didn't have much more information. Then in year two, we tweaked it based on some kind of surveys and informal information. And now in year three, we set it based at this kind of really maximum amount that would have been needed to mobilize every single responder for 60 days. And now that we have that in place, we're really learning that, oh, okay, so the real response is probably even less than that, which is great because we can save money on the insurance and actually make the insurance as efficient as possible and cover what actually needs to be covered, and then also have some money left for more reef response training, for example. But the reality is that we really need to update our knowledge of who could actually be responding all the time. We kind of need that to be a living number so that we can buy the most efficient insurance coverage possible and have the best informed budgets.
Gracias, Jacqueline. Scarlett, solo para agregar, entonces, realmente los estudios iniciales.
Really, what we're talking about, this is what we can do. We have to update this constantly regarding this because of what we have available to respond to this. So, for example, when this information was presented in June 1st, the June of now we've updated it. So we're constantly we're capturing this information to be able to have a more efficient point, if you would, and not just as an exact estimate, which was the first thing that we did when the first time. Thank you, Jackie. Any questions, additional ones, or recommendations that you might have? Not for the moment. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it'd be very good. Thank you. Basically, on the basis of this, what I would like to know, if Scarlett, can you tell us what has been done, or I have contact with you, that questions that I have regarding the insurance that we talk about in Honduras, for example. Yes, I had a brief summary presentation, but my computer is rebellious today, so I'm going to have it verbally because I'm unable to make the connection. So since the meeting that we had in February of this year, we would be deepening on the closeness of the presentations that we've made. So Mr. Flores, so that you know a little bit more about what's been happened, we are socializing this more as initiative for the case of Honduras because of the government changes or administration changes. We are making a presentation to the new authorities of the institutions that we identified that were key in the sense of the benefit of the services and of the reef benefits. So the environmental authorities said they were the authorities in charge of the officials in charge of protected areas. So these these would be in charge of the insurance policies for Honduras. We also invited the tourism sector as well, and the agriculture and cattle secretariat as well, and also the merchant marines as well. So this is the first approach that we did. We talked about the program and what the approach we have, and the agreements to the ministries of the different cities to have a more detailed approach to what we've been developing. And in line of this, we want to express to each one of you that we have, as a country, appropriate ourselves with what the policies are, so that we corresponding national coverage, as it were, as countries. So as we've all, it also expressed by Clodo, it's much more economical to do it by a group of the region. But we have tried to have approaches with the Tourism Institute of Honduras to see that the benefit that the tourism sector does give, that they've also been even giving to them feedback on what the project is doing. And also we went to the General Fisheries Directorate because of what it has to do with fishing, the fisheries department. So they're going to continue supporting us within the framework of what we've done as presentations, by the sources of finance, and the same as the merchant marine. And in the merchant marine itself, they had a vision that within the capacities that they have, that we have at Honduras of brigades in the island of the Bay Islands of Guanaja, Utila, and Ratan. These brigades, one of the representatives of the merchant maids was a restoration, if you would. So they're going to have a closer approach to be able to come up with working more closely with the brigades and to make sure that they know how it functions, and that the efforts that we doing for the response capabilities is also can be done with them hand in hand, and also formalizing this agreement with the brigades of Honduras. We have initially signed with the Conservation Institute of the authority of the Wildlife Institute in the protected areas. So we signed with 2021 with the other environmental one. And this is also would include the merchant marine this year, because they have been very interested to be able to support this initiative in the manner they could, in the importance of protecting the reef and everything that depends from those reefs. So therefore, today, at the site we had at the last institutional meeting with COPECO, for example, which is the FEMA of Honduras. And with Claudio, we went to be able to do it with one of the things that was agreed to initially is that they were very interested in supporting what the brigades the response brigades were, and for the paramedic insurance. And they were very open to to be able to share information of the country, because they are the ones who give us the information regarding precisely the parameters that we know for the insurance coverage in Honduras. Therefore, they will also good enough to show us the representation that they have at the regional level in Ceiba and the Bay Islands, and they're very open to the representatives that they also become trained as brigade themselves, to be able to have a more active members, if they would, to be able to follow up on the storms and hurricanes that happen, and that in the country, and also if there is a hurricane hit, that they would also be able to go join this. This has been with the closeness that we were working with, the liaison we've had with them, and also comment to you that at the level of the country, we are trying to fiscalize the governance, if you would, of the secretaries and the directors of the oceans. It also includes the other authorities that got merchant marine, fisheries, and both in the protected areas and wildlife, and the natural resources ministries, and the merchant marine. That would be benefit as this, because these then are the authorities or the officials that we mentioned, that we have stewardship of the taking decisions in the ocean as well. So we have the analysis and more consensus building, and basically know what the points of it. And this will strengthen the support that we're having, and the involvement of the insurances, so, and the capacities that we have to respond to these emergencies, and have a channel to be able to channel these and streamline these decision-making processes, so that all the officials at every level of each one of the institutions, or at the right level of each one of the institutions, we're able to reach and be able to know what's happening, and be more official in the way. So that's the closeness that we've been able to do, and I think if I'm ready for any questions or any comments that we might have, that with all your comments are very good, also very useful for me. Thank you. Thank you, Scarlett. And with the engineer Flores, we talked last year with we could also go in, also approach with the Ministry of Finance, because this program is because they're economic. So as you've seen, Jackie, that we're always at the process of financing, and that the strategy that we have of sustainability is also the putting of these things together. Therefore, we don't have yet the budget, but we are trying to capture these funds, the resources. So we're going to see what possibilities the other potential sources of financing, for example, in Honduras, where other is. What do you think? Who do you think we can also talk about? Because of the coverage in 2024, 25, because with this, the coverage that we have now is going to finish in May. So next year we'd have another coverage for another year, and we're trying to come up with the right answers. And what is the possibility in Honduras to be able to have other forms of sources that might be able to be available?
Perdón, Claudia, se me entrecortó un poquito. La
The question that you just had, please go ahead. Yes, do it. If we haven't, because we have been working with the Secretariat of Tourism, and they have said, when we told them about what, and we explained to them the motive of what we're doing, there was a proposal presented that they were going to have an analysis through their chamber of tourism to see how they could come up with some identities or identify some key players. So we are going to institutionalize this liaison, if you would, with what the Secretariat of Tourism, that we're going to have a meeting now. So we are ready now to go and meet with them and sit down with them with the directors of each one of them, of each one of the chambers, if you would, because it would be more feasible, because we are seeing that what we've been analyzing is that those can be sources of financing, because we are talking about this, doing it through some projects. And also, we are thinking about coming closer to the Ministry of Finance of Honduras, also to see what possibilities that we have, because we have knowledge that there are some insurances, policies that the government already has. So see if we have some linking with this to be able to integrate this insurance for our reefs.
Okay, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Entonces, no sé, licenciado,
Therefore,
¿alguna
I don't know if anybody have any recommendations or questions that we might take up now. I think that the presentation was very good, very comprehensive. Thank you. Congratulations. So it's important to have with the liaison that we must have the linking with the Ministry of Finance with how the programs work, so be able to see how sustainable we can be and see how the different ministries. For example, in Guatemala, we found that we have parametrics that we do in some cases through the Ministry of Finance, but when the payment happens, it has to be through that. So that's how the procedure sometimes is held up. So we must see that we have if you Licenciado Flores, if you could present something, if you have any mechanisms that you want to suggest to us regarding this. Yes, I will share that. Yes. Ingeniero Flores says he can share my screen with you. You can share now, she says. Yes. Okay, he says. I don't know if you were able to see what I've got on my screen here. Okay. Yes, she says, yes, we can all see it. So I'm going to talk here through realities, if you would, about the budgets for climate risks. This is it's a very large, which we're talking about is quite large. These are marine ecosystems in there. So we have to talk here regarding the agreement in Paris of 2015. What we did there is present a new paradigm to be able to see how we can also go away from the traditional ways we're doing with it, to see how we can have support of the different greenhouse gases and whatnot. And briefly, the efforts of Paris, that is an international agreement on climate change, and it has its principal object of the global of what the increase in temperature would be. And here we go. This, therefore, the region presents a high risk in multi threats of scenes of climate origin, hurricanes, flooding, landslides, droughts, and the famous phenomenon of the Niño, the Niña in the south. We are going very close to the 2 degrees that we're talking about, increase in temperature. And between 2015 and 2018, we reduced considerably the average of rainfall in the region as well. So the quantification of this, of 180 countries of the 2014, the Guatemala was the first, one of the first. Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Dominican Republic were out to the positions 21 to 50. And Costa Rica and Panama, they were under the risk of direct impact as well. Now, here we must talk about, unfortunately, what the determined contributions of each one of them, that the nucleus of the Agreement of Paris, and how do we reach the objectives in a longer term, because approximately 43% of this we will need for 2030, and we must reach this for the region, zero emissions in 2050. Therefore, with this umbrella, if you would, we must have some. We have reinforced, some of the states have reinforced this of the greenhouse gas or emissions, and they're working on. But with all these efforts are not sufficient to be able to do what we have to do to reach the goals that we've set. Therefore, in America and the Caribbean, we must represent a percentage of the climate change of these countries, and these countries have presented distributions that are determined, and the 12% of the and the 88% of the processes of establishing it. So we have to take into account that these researchers have come up with is that the fossil fuel dependency has been very high, and this is signified the financial is still an agenda that's pending for implementing the plans of the NDC. So therefore, here we have to take into account that the projects of the Central American Integrated Secretariat have different speeds, but we must advance at the same time with a more efficient way of the energy, because of the energy transition that we have, the eco-efficiency has to be improved. Now, within the SICA countries, the NDC is the 2 of them we have very quantified their needs as far as their financial needs are concerned. And they are Belize and Dominican Republic. The objectives of the research that you've done, they've come to be able to $1.4 million in 2030, and recognizing that these funds have been committed to be able to do these actions that we've taken into account. There is 4 billion, and these are related to the climate change. And there's an estimate then that there will be those needs of the 318 million between 2021 and 2020, recognizing that there's committed funds, but there is a financial gap to execute these actions that's estimated in 146 million with among the mitigation efforts. So so we feel that the IDB for these actions, if we put them together, we would represent 47% of our GDP. In the case of the Dominican Republic, they try to save, they propose to reach based on the options of mitigation, the evaluations and proposals, mobilize an investment estimated at 8.9 billion US dollars for food security and other sectors. Therefore, they are estimating an investment and adaptation in the order of $8.6 billion in sectors of water security, food security, and resilient citizens. This is be part of the research that we have to be able to do. Now, what is the role, if you would, of the state to be able to reach these goals? First, we have to plan adequately the public expenses, and therefore the national budgets must have a very key position to integrate climate and sustainable development. And the programming of using of the resources must be consequent with the objectives of the decarbonized development and resilience, and that we have to prioritize investments in line with the NDC, develop public projects that respect the objectives of climates and in critical areas and sectors. We have to incentivize and create the right environment to build finance from the private sector and to avoid investments that represent abandoned actives in the future and introduce research and development, others in the projects of the investment, of the public investments. And in this thing, it's very convenient to look into what the phases are of the budget cycles of the different areas to be able to identify where they are of the planning of the inclusion of these things in the national budgets and control of the executive in the first phase would be precisely that, to do that, to be able to have the national budget would have a fundamental phase to incorporate the NDC in the budget. In the next phase, we'd have to incorporate the ministers to be able to have the resources that they need, so that in this phase we can have the different sectors that be able to work one and have a key role to play. So as final reflections, we have to relate, and we say the public expense and the climate change permits the countries of more congruency of the use of the public resources, so that they can have a development that is sustainable and possible to generate economic benefits that are both social and environmental. But it's also we must strengthen the capacities of the in the areas of the climate change to be able to understand how this can be it can be also become a fiscal risk as a contingent passive, if you would. So now, what is the role in the emission of the, because it's an instrument that is being financed. This that we're talking about is a we are we have key areas that we have to have a parametric insurance. We have to first have a infrastructure of a market that means that they have a sustainable. What does this mean? That we have to define standards, the environmental, sustainability, and governance, and to coordinate the preparing of taxonomies and the develop and instruments financial. We have to have my financial management with a green focus to be programmed that do what the activities are and to mitigate and see also presenting, coming up with strategies that be sustainable. The role of this subject was of the financial climate, present and incorporated management of the public debt with sustainable bonuses, strengthens capacities and accredit the entities for the access of these climate funds, and also for lobbying, so for the increase of significantly the financing, it's a concessional for the adaptation, and also simplify regulations or norms international to be able to access climate financing. This, of course, we have the necessity of regional coordination with various entities. And here we could see that my secretariat would be one of the instances that we can articulate with a fundamental. That is, those are the construction of the I wanted to share with you.
Muchas gracias, licenciado Josefín. Muy interesante la presentación.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for your presentation. Therefore, we have come up as a conclusion of what you come up to be. I would ask, before the passing of microphones, so the question is, would you think that the countries of the ministries of finances could be able to intervene or be able to support this new financial mechanism? Do you think it's possible? Yes, he says. All this which signifies parametric insurances. We could talk about the for Mexico's that we had, and the COSEFIN was 7 countries, and within these 7 countries, with the CRIF, they have the contracting of Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Panama. Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Panama. They know that Belize, for example, it's part of the Mesoamerican reef and of SICA, but not COSEFIN also has contracted a policy with this type with the CRIF. So therefore, also regionally within the framework of the COSEFIN with the CRIF, the countries have done so when the parameter of that each one of the countries could work with the CRIF, but this is fundamentally coordinated through the Ministry of the Environment, because the finance ministries, because they're the ones that quantify the losses and they quantify the damages or the losses. This liquidity injection with it is of the paramount of this that allows that these resources that are labeled for this investment not be postponed, to be able to have a response to the emergency. It's more immediate. And finally, the creation of any financial instrument, as it would be, they would have a competence to be able to have the fiscal reply to this, to be able to develop these things with the ministries of the environment and natural resources. But the experience that we've had, parametric insurance, is that the Ministry of Finance are the key. They're involved in the development of these type of instruments. You know that also the countries of COSEFIN are part of the dry corridor of Central America. We are trying to develop a policy, the regional policy that would also include drought. And the idea is fundamentally is to have a series of financial instruments to be able to transfer this rescue, so that this risk can be estimated to creating infrastructures, public infrastructures that cannot be used for other things in the emergencies, so that we have these ministries of finance that have a key role in the making of it, and as well as the management of this type of instruments, with the experience that we have for Parametric of the parametrics of the, and this is good experience that we've had. Thank you very much, Jackie. Do we have any other questions or anybody else?
No, I don't think at the moment. That was really helpful presentation. Thank you. I think, yeah, the CRIF example is obviously a really good one. I think the kind of key thing that the MAR insurance program builds on, that we would need to build into something like that if it was managed at the Ministry of Finance level, would be the rapid payout mechanism. So the MAR insurance program sits on top of the MAR fund's emergency fund, which has the links to the response brigades that are already established, and like basically guidelines for how to make sure that that's a really fast distributing mechanism. And with, for example, CRIF payouts, it's the wider emergency. So the flexibility for the government to basically use those funds however they see fit in the emergency is excellent. But with the kind of reef response mechanism, we probably also want to see some kind of fast dispersing mechanism to make sure that basically the reef responders are also getting kind of the relatively small portion that can easily be forgotten, basically. And I think that yeah, it's really interesting to think about how a kind of CRIF mechanism might also integrate one of these fast dispersing, specifically for reefs mechanisms.
Gracias, Jackie. Sí, eso me parece interesante también, que tendría que
Thank
hacerse.
you, Chrissy. This is going to be a more structured program, don't you think? Yes, to be able to assure that these funds arrive at the level of brigades and the sites. And I have a question, and to Scarlett, if the countries, do you think, if like Lisa Flores, if this is the countries could be, for example, in the case of COSEFIN, if we make it sustainable, if the program could be able to continue with the structure that has it now, that this is a progress that we've mentioned before, is basic for restorations of the natural environment of the reef. We've had the assistance of the payment of the premiums of the insurance. Do you think that this program can be able to evolve and be able to continue to work as it is to MAR could be still the policy holder per se for the insurance for emergency and be able to work with the countries constructing new capacities? I think it is possible, says Licenciado Flores, but we must have to come up with a governance mechanism that, like, for example, the CRIS has already. This would assure, should we say, to obtain the funding in a more rapid manner. Because, for example, I remember what would be the limit for all the countries is 2 million, right? Yeah. With the covenant, it would be 2 million for this, but this could vary for the next year. But yes, he says yes. For this, you would need approximately. Then, how much do you need? This we paid 207 for 11 sites this year, and next year the analysis we're doing for Jacqueline that we get $110,000. So is that right? It's 110,000 to be able to continue with this coverage, but it's also we could also be able to reduce the response of each one of them as well. We could do that. 110,000 for all the countries? Yes, for all the countries. 110,000, he says. She says yes.
And that would be for a 1.5 million US dollar limit. It would be slightly reduced, but still we think adequate for the response. Actually, I think quite adequate.
Sí, con un límite de 1.2
with a limit of 2 million for next year, as with $1,200,000 as the limit for next year. The limit goes down a bit, but we could still talk about having the advantage that we have now. If we look at it with this is designed to specifically that these can be able to cover the policies itself and see 200. I think I would what the 250,000 annually. She's asking the question. Is that right? What the endowment for the year would be?
Sorry, Claudia.
250,000. She's talking about the endowment for the year. Would it be 250,000? I don't recall what the annual once it's installed and when it's earning. What would be the earnings that we'd be able to, or the profit that we'd be able to have every year?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have some estimated projections at the moment, but so if we, for example, just raise let's say around 3 million US dollars from ISF and a couple of other potential contributors, then I think that we can cover something like 200,000 every year, and that would be good coverage. But or maybe a little bit less, but then ideally we would raise a little bit more so that we could continue to basically we can cover the entire MAR into perpetuity if we raise around 5 million in the endowment. So that would be quite.
Un dato.
As a date, he's wants to share data with us for this Julia tropical of the 8th of November of 2022. The CRIF was given to Nicaragua approximately $8.9 million.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know, I mean, the CRIF, I don't know what their premiums, what their annual premiums are, but also I think, I mean, in general, the CRIF coverage, the attachment point's quite a lot higher, I believe. So what our cover would do would pay out every 3 to 5 years on average. It pays out quite a lot, but and quite similar amounts because the range for response costs just isn't that huge. Whereas I think the CRIF payments, there's a lot more volatility in the actual payout amounts, and I think the attachment is quite higher, right? Because this program would just be so tiny compared. It would basically be like a little, I don't know. Essentially, from the analysis that we've done, I think you can get very good coverage for Honduras for somewhere between 40 and 65,000 annually. And then the whole program for something like 200 to 250,000 annually. Which I guess is, if you look at just that IDB report, I mean, that's less than 1% of just that annual tax revenue from the reef-related accommodation.
Bueno, muy bien. Yo creo que sí es.
Yes, I do think that the CRIF system, see how we can add this within the projects, because they're guided towards the CRIF. This, I'm sorry, my ignorance, but yes, it's also directed to nature itself. And there's something that we're talking about is much more. It also includes emergencies, addressing populations and nature. So it has to be structured in such a way that this part to be able to actually, when we assist nature itself, that is now not to receive reaching a priority should be done, and so be able to continue with this process through the endowment with the support of the governments of the region, of course. So I don't know, Scarlett, if you've got any other comments to make on this regard. Yes, I had a question basically within the presentation that was done by Alfredo. It was very illustrative, and thank you very much. It was very useful information that you shared with us. My question is, can we make a synergy, if it would, what the national contribution would be, with which we come up with, and see how we can be able to include the program as so this would be, for example, the case of Honduras, these commitments that we've made is we believe that in Honduras has a very good strategy, but here the financials mentioned is managed by you. We want to know, and he says, yes, you're in the right line, and I want to outline and signify a principle. The information that I used to be able to present this was the 7.7 on the basic of the ISIP. So to the moment I found that of the countries that are part of SICA are only Belize and the Dominican Republic are quantifying actually what their needs are for the financing to be able to go to cover the NDC of with the adoption of mitigation. The other countries have they have mapped out some of the adaptive mitigation for the NGN and NDC, but there's not something in this this database that I consulted, we not found it. We don't have a quantification of the financial of how these other two countries have that I showed to you, that Belize precisely has done so. And also, as you know, has emitted with TNC, that she's mentioning, he'd come up with a bond, if you would, of the environment that they would actually go down from 110,000 of IDB to much less than that in 2023 forward. So therefore, I believe that the case of Honduras, we have to work on working very closely with the credit department of the Ministry of Finance, precisely through the programs of good financial governance in the second part that we manage. We are supporting it to be able to establish their office of management in climate change. So we think that, yes, I feel that those Terna should be also approaching this general secretariat of the Secretary of Finance of Honduras to be able to structure the things that are aligned to the budget as well as to the NDC, and particularly because of the rest of the budget secretaries, the budget must comply with a role that has to be linking everything, but within the whole coverage, macro fiscal coverage. That's why I put that the different phases of the economical cycles of the phase one of the budget is very important. It's fundamental to be able to see what can be incorporated in the NDC within the budget. And this is where the Ministry of Finance, they've come up with the obliging stewardship of the ministries. They have to do so. And it is very fundamental to incorporate it in the NDC within the budget. And here I see that an area for areas of control, the instances of the different steps of the intersectorial steps that are taken about the Ministry of State of Serna, natural resources, should be a role that is be articulating or hinging on a partner with the ministries. So thank you very much that you recommendations that you've given us, because sometimes we socializing the program in us, but looking at from the point of view that you've shared with us today, we are now in the biodiversity. We are executors of the environmental of the coast and the harmonization of the policies within the following up and compliance with the national plan of change, climate change, and in line with the NDC. And that would be a very good direction to be able to strengthen the argument that we will be taking to the Ministry of Finance, particularly to request the people in there, the people that you recommended So thank you very much for this input so that we know what the lines that we should be able to go and linked it, and I've already made a note of it. He says, yes, it's correct. I have here, for as an example, the commitments, the climate commitments of Honduras are present, and I have them here. And you could be you could anticipate what I was going to say. According to this the database that I have, that the measures of mitigation are relative to the reduction of emissions fundamentally, and therefore must be implemented starting in 2021 and finalized in 2030. That is, he says that Honduras will be committed to reduce these emissions to 60% to towards the use of 2030, excluding the sectors of, I'm looking them up now, LUSF, the sectors, the use of the use of soil and agriculture, what is in the Lulu in English. This is for the year 2030. We commit to promote the increase, the implementation of the use of conservation and functional restoration of the rural landscape, and with the millions hectares under restoration. That's what the mitigation measures that are included here, and the reach for the sector will be energy and agriculture and transport, in solid wastes and in industry could be covered. The covered the gases of the heat of greenhouse gases, and they don't quantify the amount of financing and mitigation. This is what we need to include then, because I think that, yes, that would be very, very convenient and to go to the Ministry of Finance to be to the Director of Credit, public credit, who has all the subject of financing, that they know with this unity, know what how climate change is also within the this particular directorate. I think that is they are defined some goals, for that the ones I've mentioned to you that appear in this database. They don't have an estimate of the needs of adaptation and mitigation, and how much would this signify for these combined actions in the in the GDP. I'm making a note of this, and thank you very much for your recommendations. I don't have any more questions. I am very clear on that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Licenciado Flores. And as you mentioned, we are always trying to looking for different sources of financing to be able to ensure that the coverage for next year, and to be able to have the next tranche, as it would, for it. So this is what we've seen we've known that some people have already come up with some, and the core, I'm not, again, the fund, you have some, what is the funds of, you have 2 million, but we want to have where we want to have we have a foundation of 5 million or a trust of 5 million. I can give you a couple of more ideas. And this would be part of the conversations that you would have with the officers of the Ministry of Finance. You say that you could have with the colleagues go into an operation to the directorate of the Central American Bank of the CABE to be able to have a non-reimbursable. We could probably have $1 million available. That's not non-reimbursable, and you can have because Honduras can take it to the directorate because it is part of it. But this, let's talk about it. Please do talk about it. Those alternatives that you must see with CERNA and with CEFIN and with the Directorate of Public Credit to be able to see, put together these operations and go into the directorate of it, because this is going to be a sovereign decision of one of the countries that it belongs to the Mar region. So but that is $1 million that be able to have the non-reimbursable conventional that was by CABE. But you need to have that the environmental ministry with the financial ministry could coordinate their efforts to be able to. That's the recommendation that I can make at this moment. Thank you very much for your recommendations. Very good. We are going to take into account your suggestion to be able to work with this and with this information that we can support. So thank you very much. And we can accompany the effort if you feel it's convenient. In these conversations, we can also be present. As I've mentioned at the end, that we are the Secretariat of the Ministries of Finances. We can articulate, we can link, if you would, regionally these type of things. Thank you. That would be very spectacular for all our countries. Yes, we could see what we can have a hybrid meeting with an example that we're talking about at this moment, and to see how we can present it to the officers of the Ministry of Finances to be able to present it well. And that is Don Orlando is a director. Don Orlando Galvez is the Orlando Gardner is the key person. I will write it here on the chat. Gardner. He is the general director of that office within the Ministry of Finances. So we will then try to approach him and see. We will communicate to you to be able to come up with a meeting, including what you know. Also, we can include with this person. He is also a member of the directorate of the Green Financial Fund. So he is very it's very, very opportune that we also produce. This this link that I'm talking about. Does Honduras has some goals of MDC, but they don't have the quantified it, the needs, the financial needs of the adaptation and in mitigation. So the director of credit, the general credit, with the Green Fund, a member of the board. So I feel that yes, this approach has to be done within CERNA and the Ministry of these two secretariats of state that also talk about that talk about environment and in the public investments. So this be a moment to represent climate change also involved. Yes, they also should. They have participated in the participate in the COP28 meeting as well. They're going to be participating in that, I'm sure. That my suggestions would be in the case of specific of Honduras to look for this approach that has that what I said the financial ministry is a financial and in climate change. That's very, very true. Thank you very for your comments and suggestions you gave to us.
Porque es que si no, lo que pasa es lo siguiente.
So if we must have that the Ministry of the Environment, they must they can come up with a conceptual and technically well solid. However, that has to be then, because that faces the budget affair, as it would. So it's best to go working on in a coordinating way with the phases of the budget phases, let's say, so that you can in phase one, as I was telling you, where our policies of obligatory budget of the public funds. That's the fundamental phase to be able to incorporate all the NDC, to translate all those goals into money, and to read all the other areas is to have the intersectoral instances as an entity that is becoming coordinated with it. So I insist that we must have coordinated areas with very, very good plans that you make in environment. It has to be quantified to be able to, what you know what, and your line, but that has a counterpart in budget, and you can actually have a conflict to be able to avoid this, to be able to work in a coordinated fashion. And that's my recommendation. Yes, all the public policies, the budget must go through for the Ministry of Finance. So I understand what you were explaining to us. Yes, particularly that this is the opportune moment, because the agenda that we do is to be able to do what the NDC budget says so. And we're gonna try to get to all the people in the next few weeks to be able to come up with this meeting. Thank you very much, he says. And we will also be from the Secretary of COSEFIN we can also accompany you in this process if you deem it pertinent. Thank you. Yes, totally. And we thank you very much for your availability. We'll take it as a great value to us. Thank you. So recommendations have been excellent. Thank you very much, she says. To continue with the agenda, the 403, I wanted to say very rapidly to you. I don't know if we have five more minutes. The subject of a strategic regional meeting. Basically, these insurances and financial mechanisms that so the risks in these areas. It's not new, but it is relatively innovative, if you would, because not only in also in many regions of the world to be able to do it not only for reefs but also for other ecosystems and even for fisheries, for example. So we want to make a strategic, a regional meeting to be able to come up with the regional instances to be able to create the consciousness and the awareness, if you would. And I wanted to show you something that I'll show and share my screen now. So of course this is a subject to your agreement that we would, the objectives of the meetings would be to plan it, right? Part of the plans would be, and our work plans would be with our donors, is to have the information and these financial measures to have a training with key people and users of the reasons of the meeting. But these specific reasons would be to be able to, for example, the SICA, the CCAD, the COSEFIN, the NAC, the other ministries of the environment, the finance, the other donors. Some of them are committees, work committees of the and others that you might consider to be a virtual meeting of 4 years, hybrid, and the group would be president to have we could have it in the SICA offices of some connected there, and others for the public will be virtually done. So we have to, what we try to do is to have an interchange of experiences and information to be able to do it, to be able to have this, where there's information that we can share and manage at the countries at the regional level, and also that the attention to that all these people can also identify that they be implemented in of each one of them. And this is, as I say, the meeting that's planning for looking for the capacities to increase the capacities of the meeting at the regional. And if it's virtual this year, be able to do so. If not, we can't do it this year, we'll do it next year. And talk a little bit about the follow-up that we do on the meetings that we have that we've also done in 2021. And some agreements were made, for example, have a path forward for 2024, 2028, and see how this we can have an action plan to be able to work in conjunction with all of them. What do you think? I want to show you something that goes in this what you may go to. This morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, we had a meeting. Here, as you can see, I did not participate in this meeting. We have had a very very occupied agenda. But look at the Secretary of the System there as salutes here by we feel that yes, the accordance in the ministries of the environment and development and with the CCAD, the executive, and with other instances, the correspondence to work with a proposal, regional proposal of SICA to be able to be able to present it at COP 28. So on this regard, the Secretary of the Executive, they want to inform that to be able to go, we will do so, the intersectoral meeting to be able to explain the region of the construction getting ready for COP 28 regarding of the regional climate change strategy with the regional institutions that is linked to these subjects. So therefore, if SICA's, and I've captured a bit what SICA's proposing with the objectives of the proposed meeting that you are suggesting, they're in line, yes, one with the other, she says, because yes, one of the people that we've trained would be having to have this mechanisms and this type of information to be able to rescue this and to propose a path forward to COP 28 regarding our region. What happens is, I think that I did the strategy of climate change documents is it's also already around since 2010. There's another one that I analyzed is the regional 2015, 2020 framework for climate change, a mechanism for financing that was reviewed, treated the results and the indicators. I feel that it's the RETC is not actualized. It's not updating itself. And this other thing is that's called a regional environmental framework for 2015 and 2020 is not updated, and it's just very hypothetical, particularly on the mechanisms of financial availability. So therefore, I know that yes, the CCAD is part of the board of directors of the Mark Fund, and I will going to talk with all the transparency that I can. The instruments or mechanisms of financial instruments, they're always in competition. So apart from ourselves, the COSEFIN itself, I don't know what other key actor could be through the institutions, could be participating, be able to spread this strategy and to be able to have an impact. It would be significant. That is to say, and here the colleagues would be the Serna that says that the part of the CCAD, there's a proposal, there's a concrete proposal that's come up with being emitted or issued by the MDC of the CCAD. Do you have something? I'm asking the question. Do you have something specific on that, Birgit? I am not sure, she says, regarding this, because in the linkage that we have, it's basically in biodiversity only. But yes, we are seeing that the harmonization has to go into climate change as well. Regarding the other actors that we would be included within this strategy, I would also include the represent of the Sitka, because the tourism sector is very benefited by what we do for the resources of the ecosystem of the Mar region. Yes, I think Honduras is one of the strong pillars of finance that must be this. We say that tourism wants to have white beaches, and those white beaches are possible because of the reefs. So I think that that'd be a very important actor regarding the questions that you had climate change. I could not give you a contract because this is being developed. Our colleagues of climate change have been doing so, but I think that, in my opinion, yes, they're working regarding what is to quantify the cost, but because these are different processes involved, I would say they are probably working on this. My colleagues with I don't know if the CCAD or the other people, or if this is a cascading effect that's come from one to higher to other peoples that we don't have quantified in different countries. So it could be that within the committees, the two particular areas, and yes, I could see that it would be an harmonization of the ERCA and the strategy of climate change. It's an excellent opportunity to harmonize because the program of the parametric insurance is coming within the line of the climate change of biodiversity. So yes, I think it would be very opportune, very timely to have that synergy. Of course, yes. Because of the timing itself, I consider that this activity should be that is actually has a training. It's it's both informative and training as well. Yes, yes, we could do it at the beginning of next year, because as you can see, we are already working at the levels of the institutions on regional position of SICA that is going to be presented within the framework of next COP28. Yes, it would be more information, she says, to elevate the quantity. He says, yes, we have to see what the position would be that is going to be presented, and see that this activity would be also shared, broadcasted at the beginning of next year. There could be very opportunity. Yes, yeah, the timing would be very important. Yes, it's important. Yes, many events. Yep. So beginning of next year would be a very good it would be maybe the second or the third week of January. Yes, in the first or the first or in the first fortnight of January too. I put a chat, I put a PDF of what I've presented to you. I've also already shared with you. So I don't know if you can socialize it. I don't know if you've unloaded it from my chat. Yes, she says, yes, I've been able to unload it. Those are the ideas that we put. Thank you very much. I go to just another point of the agenda. Oh, no, we can also come up, if we've got nothing else, we're going to come up with a summary of what we've done and define what we need to have as far as follow-up is concerned. If anybody needs more information, define the meetings of the strategic meeting, the broadcasting of it, and we will have some meeting of the accords that we can reach. We can do it in the recess. Sarah, do you have anything you could?
Es que Divío, si lo considera oportuno, se puede acercar al CEFIN, ¿verdad? La CERNA, ¿sí? CERNA Divío se puede acercar al CEFIN.
Y ahí a la Dirección General de Crédito Público, a la Unidad de Gestión de Cambio Climático.
Exacto. Y también tengo unas notas aquí que hablan sobre la cooperación técnica no reembolsable con el
That
BESI.
talk about the non-reimbursable technical cooperation with CABE. Yes, once this approach is achieved, then we can say that in order to search out more resources for financing that is needed to expand the coverage, could be taken to the directorate of the CABE, this operation, to ask for technical
Allí tendrían que
of about $1 million, and we would have to agree of how to structure the operation. Very good, perfect. So this would be the agreements, the summary of the agreements, all the needs regarding the parametric insurance, basically for Honduras to strengthen the sustainability. And the other is regarding the meeting. Because of the timing, we propose to have this the first 15 days of January. That would be educational and training. Perfect. That sounds excellent. And I also would like to propose that we should continue in communication, exchanging information based basically on the results that Scarlett has in Honduras and based on the organization of this meeting to continue in communication to coordinate the meeting. Yes, I agree. Excellent. Also, on our behalf, Licenciado, thank you very much. We will keep you informed. We will share the memo of this meeting, the recording, and we shall continue in communication. We know you are very busy with so many important meetings for the countries, but on our behalf, if you have any questions, please send us an email, and we will keep you constantly informed with the progress and requirements. Yes. And we are always at your disposal of MAR Fund and of the insurance company. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you again. And we will close the meeting at this point. Greetings, many greetings. Thank you very much. See you soon.